She was laughing at something he'd just said. When James felt it, the familiar weight settling heavy in his chest. The dinner had been perfect. Too perfect. And that was exactly the problem. Because in his experience, the better the date, the harder the fall. He watched her smile fade. As he set his glass down, his voice dropped low. And then he said the words he'd said far too many times before. If you want to leave right now, I won't blame you. She hadn't even heard the reason yet. But James already knew how this would end. Or at least, he thought he did. James had arrived 10 minutes early, which gave him just enough time to regret every decision that led him here. He sat at a corner table in a small, cozy bistro. The kind of place with low lighting, flickering tea lights, and old exposed brick walls. Soft acoustic guitar drifted from overhead. It was the sort of spot people chose when they wanted to seem thoughtful, without trying too hard. He twisted the silver ring on his right hand, a habit he'd picked up over the last 4 years. The ring had belonged to his older brother, Tom. James had worn it every day since the funeral. Whenever anxiety crept in, his fingers found it automatically. His phone buzzed. A text from the babysitter. Harry wants to know when you're coming home. James typed back quickly. Tell him I love him. Home before 10. He slipped the phone away. Just as the door opened, Lily walked in wearing a simple navy dress, her natural waves framing her face. She spotted him and smiled. James stood up too fast, nearly knocking over his water glass. They both laughed at the clumsiness. And somehow that tiny, awkward moment broke the ice better than any rehearsed line ever could. You found it all right? James asked, as she sat down. Almost walked into the newsagent next door, Lily admitted. But I recovered with dignity. The waiter came over. Lily ordered without staring at the menu too long. Chicken Milanese, no capers, extra sauce on the side. She said it like she'd been making decisions her whole life, and saw no reason to stop now. James liked that. They started talking. And what surprised him most was how easy it felt. No forced chat about the weather or traffic. Lily asked real questions. What made him choose his job? What was he reading lately? Did he believe in luck, or just hard work? Both, James said. Hard work to build something. Luck to stop it falling apart. Lily tilted her head, considering. That's either very wise or very pessimistic. Probably both. She laughed. A real laugh that seemed to surprise even her. Her hand lifted briefly to cover her mouth, as if she hadn't expected to enjoy herself this much. James felt something loosen in his chest. For the first time in years. He wasn't calculating every word. Wasn't bracing for the moment it would turn awkward. He was just talking to someone who actually seemed to want to listen. They discovered they both loved the same obscure documentary about British jazz musicians in the 60s. They both hated small talk at parties. They both read books late at night, when they couldn't sleep, though neither admitted what kept them awake. Their food arrived, but they barely touched it. The pasta went cold, while they debated whether you could ever truly know another person, or if everyone just performed different versions of themselves. I think people show who they really are. In the small moments, Lily said. Not the big dramatic ones. It's how someone treats the waiter, or what they do when no one's watching. And what do you do when no one's watching? Lily's smile flickered, just for a second. I run. James waited for more. She reached for her water instead. And changed the subject. What about you? What's your Saturday morning like? I'm convinced you can tell everything about a person by how they spend Saturday morning. It was a casual question. The kind people ask on first dates. Without expecting anything heavy. Most would say sleeping in, coffee, brunch with mates. James felt the familiar weight settle in his stomach. This was the moment. It always came. Usually he tried to delay it by another half hour of normal. But something about Lily made him want to skip the pretense. His fingers found the silver ring again. My Saturday mornings are probably different from most, he said carefully. I've got 2 kids. Harry's 7, Grace is 5. So my Saturdays usually start around 6:30. With cartoon negotiations. And arguments about breakfast. Lily's hand froze halfway to her glass. The bistro noise seemed to fade. The music kept playing softly. The candles kept flickering. But between them, everything went still. James watched her face, looking for the signs he knew too well. The slight widening of the eyes. The tiny lean backwards. The quick mental calculation behind a polite mask. Lily didn't speak right away. 3 seconds. 4. James had learned to count these silences. He'd become an expert at measuring. When surprise turned to hesitation. When hesitation turned to the apologetic smile. When the smile turned to goodbye. He decided to save her the trouble. I know this isn't what you expected. When you agreed to dinner, he said, voice steady. He'd practiced these words so many times. They came out smooth, almost rehearsed. If you want to leave right now, I understand. I'll sort the bill. You can go. No awkwardness. No hard feelings. He meant it. That was the strange part. He wasn't being noble or self-pitying. He was just stating a fact. He'd learned the hard way. His life came with complications. Most people didn't sign up for. Giving someone an easy exit wasn't generosity. It was efficiency. Lily stared at him. Not with the polite distance he expected. But with something sharper. Almost like recognition. You've said that before, she said quietly. That exact speech, haven't you? James met her eyes. More times than I want to count. And they all left. Most didn't even wait for me to finish the sentence. The waiter passed by, glancing at their untouched plates. Neither noticed. Lily didn't reach for her bag. She didn't make excuses about an early start. She didn't give the sympathetic smile that meant goodbye. Instead, she leaned forward slightly. Her expression unreadable. I'm not them, she said. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't dramatic. It was just a statement. Quiet, obvious, like she was pointing out the weather. James didn't know what to do with that. He'd prepared for every possible response. Except this one. The one that refused to follow his script. You don't have to decide anything tonight, he said. I just wanted to be honest. Before this went any further. I appreciate that. Another silence. But this one felt different. Not the silence of someone looking for the exit. But someone thinking. Lily picked up her fork. And took a bite of the cold pasta. She chewed slowly, deliberately. As if proving a point. Your kids, she said finally. What are they like? James blinked. In 4 years of dating. No one had ever asked that. Not after hearing the news. Not before running the other way. Harry's serious, he said slowly, testing the words. He worries about things a 7-year-old shouldn't worry about. Checks the locks twice before bed. Reminds me to pay the electric bill. James almost smiled. Grace is the opposite. She thinks everything is hilarious. Last week she laughed for 10 minutes. Because the word fork sounded funny to her. Lily's expression softened, just a fraction. They sound like good kids. They are. James hesitated. They are the best thing in my life. The words slipped out before he could stop them. He usually kept that part hidden. Saved it for later. After someone had already proved they wouldn't bolt. But Lily hadn't bolted. Not yet. She was still sitting there. Eating cold chicken. Looking at him like he was a person. Not a problem. And James didn't know what to make of that at all. Continuing in the same style, the story is long, so I've adapted the full emotional arc with line breaks. If you'd like the rest of the script continued or adjusted further, let me know. The waiter returned to check on their meals. James realized they'd barely eaten. The question felt almost absurd now. He nodded politely. The waiter vanished again. Lily was still there. That fact alone kept catching him off guard. He kept waiting for her to excuse herself to the loo. And never come back. Or suddenly remember an urgent appointment. That's how it usually happened. The exit was never dramatic. Quiet. Apologetic. Wrapped in polite lies both people recognized. But Lily just sat there. Fork resting against her plate. Watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You're waiting for me to leave, she said. It wasn't a question. James didn't deny it. Force of habit must be exhausting. Going into every date expecting the worst. It's easier than hoping for something different. Lily considered this. She folded her napkin. Unfolded it again. Smoothed the creases with her fingers. It was a small, unconscious gesture. But James noticed. He noticed everything right now. The way she held her shoulders. The slight tension in her jaw. The way her eyes drifted to the door. Then back to him. She was thinking about leaving. He could see it. But she hadn't left yet. And that meant something. He just didn't know what. Can I ask you something? Lily's voice was careful now. Measured. Go ahead. Their mum, Harry and Grace's mum. Where is she? The question hit James like a punch. He'd been expecting it, of course. It was the logical next question. But expecting it and being ready were two different things. His fingers found the silver ring again. He pressed his thumb against the smooth metal. They are not my biological children, he said quietly. Lily's expression shifted. Not confusion exactly. But close. I don't understand. They are my brother's kids. Tom. He was 2 years older than me. He and his wife Sarah died 4 years ago. Car accident on the motorway. Drunk driver crossed the central reservation. The words came out flat. Factual. James had told this story enough times. That he'd learned to strip the emotion out. Emotion made people uncomfortable. Made them feel they had to offer condolences. They didn't really mean. It was easier to give facts. Detached, clinical, complete. Lily didn't speak. Her hand had stopped moving on the napkin. Harry was 3, James continued. Grace had just turned 1. My parents are gone. Dad when I was at uni. Mum a few years later. Tom and I only had each other. He took a breath. Sarah's parents. They didn't want the kids. They'd never approved of the marriage anyway. Thought Tom wasn't good enough for their daughter. When he died, they made it clear. They weren't interested in raising his children. So the kids would have gone into care. That's what the social worker said. And because of their ages. Because finding a family willing to take two at once is almost impossible. They would have been separated. Different homes. Different cities, maybe. They would have grown up not knowing each other. James remembered that meeting with painful clarity. The harsh fluorescent lights. The stack of paperwork. The woman explaining, sympathetic yet bureaucratic. That the children would be placed in the system within 72 hours. Unless family came forward. 72 hours. That was all the time he'd had. To make the biggest decision of his life. I was 30, James said. Single. My career was just starting to take off. I had plans. A life that made sense. He almost laughed. But there was no humor in it. And then I had 48 hours. To decide whether I was going to let my brother's children become strangers to each other. Lily's voice was barely a whisper. What did you do? I signed the papers. James looked down at the ring. I went to the court. Filed for emergency custody. And I brought them home. Harry didn't talk for 2 weeks. Just sat in the corner of the living room. Holding his sister like he was afraid someone would take her too. And Grace. She kept looking at the door. Waiting for her parents to walk through it. The memory still hurt. 4 years later. It still hurt. The ring? Lily asked softly. That's his. James nodded. They gave it to me at the hospital. Along with his wallet, his watch, his wedding band. I wear this one every day. The wedding band. I'm keeping it for Harry. When he's older. A long silence settled between them. The bistro had grown quieter. The dinner crowd thinning. Somewhere behind them, a couple laughed at a shared joke. The music played on, soft, indifferent. Lily pressed her palms flat against the table. As if steadying herself. James. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. No, I mean. She shook her head. I came into tonight expecting. I don't know what I was expecting. Something simple. Something easy. A nice dinner. Some conversation. Maybe a second date if things went well. Her voice wavered, just slightly. This is not simple. This is a whole life. A whole family. Those kids, they've already lost everything once. They can't afford to lose anything else. And anyone who walks into your life. They are walking into theirs too. Lily's eyes were bright now. Not with tears exactly. But with something raw. Unguarded. Do you understand what I'm saying? James understood perfectly. He'd heard variations of this speech before. Different words. Different women. But always the same conclusion. Too complicated. Too much responsibility. Too far from the easy romance people imagined when they swiped right. I understand, he said. Do you? Because I'm not sure I do. Lily laughed, but it came out shaky. I called off a wedding 3 months before the date. Did I tell you that? James shook his head. 5 years with someone. 5 years building a life. Making plans. Picking furniture. Meeting families. And 3 months before we were supposed to stand in front of everyone. And promise forever. I walked away. She twisted the napkin in her hands. Everyone thought I was mad. My mum still hasn't forgiven me. My friends stopped inviting me to their weddings. They thought I'd jinx them. What happened? Nothing happened. That was the problem. No big fight. No affair. No dramatic betrayal. I just woke up one morning and realized I couldn't breathe. I looked at this person sleeping next to me. This perfectly good, perfectly kind person who loved me. And I felt like I was suffocating. Like I was disappearing into a life someone else had designed. Lily's hands stilled. She looked at James with an expression almost pleading. I run, she said simply. That's what I told you earlier. When things get real. When things get complicated. I run. It's the one thing I'm really good at. And you're thinking about running now. It wasn't an accusation. James said it calmly. The same way he'd said everything tonight. No judgment. Just observing. Lily's gaze drifted to the front window. The street outside was quiet. Empty. Easy to disappear into. I'm thinking about it, she admitted. James felt something shift inside him. Not surprise. He was long past surprise. Not anger. Just a familiar, bone-deep weariness. The exhaustion of someone who'd stopped expecting anything. And was just going through the motions of hope. Because he didn't know what else to do. Can I tell you something, he said. Lily turned back to him. When I first took the kids in, I thought I was doing the noble thing. The right thing. I thought, okay, this is hard. But it's temporary. Eventually I'll figure it out. Eventually I'll find someone who understands. Who wants to be part of this. Eventually it won't feel like I'm doing it alone. He picked up his water glass. Set it down without drinking. 4 years later. I'm still waiting for eventually. And somewhere along the way, I started to believe something. James's voice was quiet now. Almost gentle. I started to believe that choosing the right thing means giving up the right to be happy. That you only get one or the other. Responsibility, or love. Never both. Lily stared at him. Her eyes had gone soft. Vulnerable in a way James hadn't seen before. That's a terrible thing to believe, she whispered. Maybe. But it's easier than hoping for something different. And being disappointed every time. The waiter appeared again. This time with the bill. Neither had asked for it. But the bistro was clearly winding down. James glanced at his watch. 9:45. He'd promised the kids he'd be home before 10. He always kept his promises to them. They'd had enough broken promises in their short lives. James reached for his wallet. Movements mechanical. Disconnected. He knew how this ended. He'd known since Lily's eyes drifted to the door. She wouldn't make a scene. She was too kind for that. She'd wait until he left. Maybe send a polite text tomorrow. Lovely time, but not compatible. He'd reply politely. Hollow. Then delete her number. That was the script. He knew it by heart. He placed enough cash on the table, covering the bill and a generous tip. Lily, he said. Voice carrying that familiar note. The one he used when letting someone off the hook. I want to thank you for staying this long. For listening. Most people don't make it this far. She opened her mouth. But he held up a hand. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to explain. Or apologize. Or make excuses. I understand. Your life is your own. You have every right to protect it. He stood up. Reached for his jacket. If you don't want to see me again, that's okay. I won't call. I won't text. You can walk out of here. And pretend tonight never happened. The smile on his face was small. Practiced. Sad. It was the smile he wore every time he prepared for goodbye. I've had a really good time tonight, he continued. Better than I've had in years, honestly. And I think, in another life, things could have been different. But this is the life I have. These are the choices I made. And I don't get to ask anyone to carry that weight with me. He shrugged on his jacket. The motion felt final. I have to go home now. My kids are waiting. Lily still hadn't moved. She sat frozen in her chair, hands gripping the edge of the table, like she was holding onto something slipping away. James looked at her one last time. He wanted to memorize this moment. Not because it was special, but because it was familiar. This was how all his stories ended. Him walking away. Someone else staying behind. Relieved they'd escaped something they never asked for. Goodbye, Lily, he said. Take care. He turned toward the door. Behind him, the music played on. Candles flickered. The bistro hummed with the quiet sounds of closing time. James walked one step at a time toward the exit he knew so well. He didn't look back. He'd learned not to. Looking back only made it harder. To accept what he'd accepted years ago. That some people were meant to carry their burdens alone. And no amount of hoping could change that. The door was only 10 steps away now. Then 8. Then 5. His hand reached for the handle. And then he heard her voice. James. His hand froze. For a moment, he didn't move. He'd trained himself not to hope. Not to turn around expecting anything other than a polite goodbye. Or a request to split the bill after all. But something in the way she said his name made him stop. He turned. Lily was standing now. Her chair pushed back. Her napkin crumpled where she'd dropped it. She stood with her hands at her sides. And there was something different in her posture. A tension that hadn't been there before. Like she was fighting her own instincts. Wait, she said. James stayed where he was. Hand still on the door. The bistro was nearly empty. The waiter cleared a nearby table. Pretending not to notice. The music had shifted. Slower. Sadder. Though neither really heard it. Lily took a step forward. Then another. She moved like someone walking toward the edge of a cliff. Aware of every inch of ground beneath her. I don't know if I can do what you're doing, she said. Her voice was steadier than he expected. But there was a tremor underneath. Barely controlled. I need you to understand that. I truly don't know if I have it in me to be part of something this big. James said nothing. He just watched. Waiting. But there's something I do know. Lily stopped a few feet away. Close enough that he could see the slight redness around her eyes. The way her chest rose and fell with deliberate breaths. When you told me about Harry and Grace, I didn't see a man carrying baggage. I didn't see someone too complicated. Or too much work. She took one more step closer. I saw a man who chose to love. When nobody forced him to. You could have walked away. You had every reason to walk away. You were 30 years old. With your whole life ahead of you. And you chose to give that up. For 2 children who would never remember the sacrifice. James felt something shift in his chest. A crack in the wall he'd spent 4 years building. That's not a burden, Lily continued. That's not something to apologize for. That's the most extraordinary thing I've ever heard anyone do. Her eyes met his. And there was something fierce in them now. Not anger. Conviction. The conviction of someone who'd made a decision. And was terrified of it. I've spent the last 2 years running from anything that asked me to stay. I called off my wedding because I was scared of losing myself in someone else's life. And every time I've met someone who might actually matter, I've found a reason to leave. Before things got real. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. That's who I am. That's the pattern I can't seem to break. She reached up and pressed her hand to her chest, as if trying to hold something in. But tonight, when you were telling me about your brother, about the choice you made, about how you've spent 4 years believing you don't deserve to be happy. She shook her head. I don't want to be the next person who walks out that door and proves you right. I don't want to be another reason you think love isn't for people like you. James's throat felt tight. His hand dropped from the door handle. He found himself taking a step toward her without meaning to. Lily, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. She cut him off, gently. I'm not making promises I can't keep. I'm not telling you I'm ready to meet your kids tomorrow. Or move in next month. Or any of the things that would make this easy. I don't know what I'm ready for. She reached out and touched his arm. It was a light touch. Barely there. But James felt it like a current. I just know that I don't want to walk away tonight, wondering what might have happened if I'd stayed. I've done that too many times. I'm tired of running. For a long moment, neither spoke. The bistro hummed quietly around them. Outside, a car passed. Headlights briefly lighting the window before fading into darkness. James looked at this woman standing in front of him. This woman who had every opportunity to leave and hadn't taken it. She wasn't offering a fairy tale. She wasn't promising forever. She was just standing there, choosing not to run. And somehow that felt like more than anyone had given him in years. You don't have to save me, he said finally. His voice rougher than he intended. That's not what I'm looking for. Good? Lily almost smiled. Because I'm not very good at saving people. I can barely save myself most days. Then what are you offering? I'm offering to see you again. To try this, whatever this is. Without you having to give me permission to leave first. Her hand was still on his arm. Can we do that? Can we just see what happens next? James felt the weight of the question. It was such a simple thing. Another date. Another chance. Nothing guaranteed. Nothing certain. But for someone who'd stopped believing in chances, it felt like everything. He thought about Harry at home. Probably still awake, waiting by the window. The way he always did when James went out. He thought about Grace. Asleep by now, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was a baby. He thought about all the nights he'd come home alone. All the mornings he'd woken wondering if this was all his life would ever be. And he thought about his brother Tom, who had loved Sarah so completely that he'd married her against everyone's objections. Tom, who always said, the best things in life were the ones you had to fight for. James looked at Lily. She was still waiting, eyes holding steady on his. "Okay," he said. The word came out quiet, almost surprised, as if he hadn't expected to say it. "Okay, let's see what happens next." They walked out of the bistro together. The night air was cool against James's face. The street was empty, except for a couple walking their dog on the far corner. The quiet felt different now. Not lonely, just peaceful. They stood on the pavement, neither ready to say goodbye. "I have to go," James said. "Harry's probably still up." Lily nodded. "Go? Your kids are waiting." But neither moved right away. They just stood there, in the dim glow of the street lamp. Two people who'd spent the evening revealing wounds they usually kept hidden. "Lily." James turned to face her fully. "Thank you. Not for staying. For being the first person who didn't make me feel like I had to apologize for my life." Lily didn't say anything to that. She just looked at him, with an expression hard to read. Something between tenderness and uncertainty. Like she was seeing him clearly. For the first time. James turned and started walking toward his car. He made it about 10 steps before he looked back. Just once. A quick glance over his shoulder, to see if she was still there. She was. Lily stood on the pavement, her navy dress catching the faint light from the bistro window. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't crying. She was just standing there, watching him go. And for the first time in 2 years, she wasn't running. James raised his hand in a small wave. Lily raised hers back. Then he got in his car and drove home to his children. The story didn't end with a kiss, or a promise, or any of the things movies teach us to expect. It ended with something smaller, more honest. Two broken people who had chosen, just for one night, to stay instead of leave. That was enough for now. That was enough. Maybe you're listening to this, and you see yourself in James, carrying a weight that makes you feel unlovable, convinced that doing the right thing means being alone. Or maybe you're more like Lily, so afraid of losing yourself that you keep running before anyone gets close enough to matter. Here's what I want you to take from this story. Choosing responsibility doesn't disqualify you from love. And choosing to stay, even when it's terrifying, doesn't mean losing who you are. Sometimes the bravest thing two people can do is simply not walk away. If this story meant something to you, I'd love for you to stick around. Hit subscribe. And let's keep exploring these moments together. The messy, complicated, beautifully human moments that remind us we are not as alone as we think. I'll see you in the next one.